started here. All right, because I make myself a note, hit record button.
Got it.
So,
Got it.
but, everybody's been around long enough to know how this works tonight. And, we've got Brian's going to talk about his Benton Southern and his dog patch division of the Arkansas Valley and his relationship with Joe. But Joe asked me today about doing the intro for Brian. So right now I'm going to turn it over to Joe, and Joe's going to do the intro for Brian. And when he finishes that, I'm going to mute everybody and then ask Brian just to unmute himself, after that. Okay.
All right.
All right. Go ahead, Joe.
Hello, everybody. Good. I just wanted to say that I had the opportunity to meet Brian about 12 years ago when he started working at Whistle Stop. And being a Rock Island fan, he really wanted to model something with the Rock Island. But for some reason, I can't figure out, he wanted to model the Arkansas Valley. I have no idea. But so I said, what period do you want to model? He said, well, late 70s, early 80s. Well, I happened to get a hold of a map and I found a section of Mopac that had been abandoned from Benton, Arkansas down to Sheffield. Yeah, Arkansas.
Yep.
Yeah. And of course, he interchanged with the AV there. And then when the Rock Island fell, he got on up to Biddle Yard. And next thing I know, he says, I just want to model the Arkansas Valley. So he takes over the dog pack division and he can do the rest. But all I can say is, it still gives me shivers up my spine to think that I've actually got a friend that would actually go as far as to model my railroad, my freelance railroad, instead of the Santa Fe or the Southern Pacific or Union Pacific. Hey, Ben, So, Brian, after you, sir.
All right. Well, thank you. Let's see.
All right, I'm gonna mute everybody. Brian, you unmute yourself afterwards. And
All right.
Let's see. Of course, if anybody's got any questions, just put them in the chat for everyone to see, and I'll go ahead and ask Brian a question. Or if I miss it, somebody raise their hand and remind me. All right.
Let's see here.
I can hear you, Brian. Okay, you're good to go. Okay.
The screen. There we go. Oh, welcome to Benton Southern. I'm Brian. I born and raised. Give a little quick bit about myself. Born and raised in the Portland, Oregon area. Spent all but about 4 years here. I spent 3 years living up in the Olympia, Washington area, and then about 3/4 of a year working for the railroad in Pueblo, Colorado, before coming back to Oregon. Got interested in frames when my dad took me down to the Albina Rail Yard in northeast Portland, and I was maybe a couple years old and remember watching them switching around engines at the engine facility and drilling cars in the yard, and I was hooked. Got a Tyco train set for Christmas, the Silver Streak set, and my dad got an expander pack from Tyco, and we built a 5x9 layout in the garage with basically a big oval with a passing siding. It expanded a little bit, but it was set up in the summer when my parents could park their cars out in the yard because, or out in the driveway, I should say, because a lot of rain in the fall, winter, and spring in the Portland, Oregon area. Got out of trains a little bit during high school when I discovered girls and that kind of thing, sports. But after high school, got back into modeling and have been at it ever since. Growing up in the Oregon area, the major railroads were UP, Southern Pacific, and Burlington Northern. SP was probably one of my favorite railroads growing up, for the big Class 1 railroads before I discovered the Portland Traction and what is now the Oregon Pacific. Let's see. There's me back in 1996 when Portland, Oregon actually hosted a rail fair. The nickel plate in Oregon was a little out of place, but Doyle McCormick of the SP 4449 was a nickel plate guy, and he said, I'm going to paint my engines how I want. And so he did. And that engine actually still survives out here on the at the Oregon Rail Heritage Center, although I've heard it is for sale now. In 2001, I started volunteering for the Oregon Pacific as a conductor on Samtrak, which was their little tourist passenger service that ran about 5 miles back and forth along the Willamette River, between OMSI, which is the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry, and Oaks Park, which was a big amusement park that was actually built and started by the railroad, the Portland Traction, back in the early 1900s as a way to get people to ride their streetcars. That's where the Samtrak was where I got to run an engine for the very first time. And yeah, so I'm gonna skip back here because I didn't put these in real good order. The outline that Ken gave me asked for my influences, and several of them include my friend Jim Yonkins. He has the Benton Southern, which is an N scale up in the Olympia, Washington area. His was the first big railroad that I got to operate on that really was operation centric, where every train had a purpose, every car had a waybill and had to be taken to a certain location and that sort of thing. Reading Model Railroader as a kid, I always loved the Virginian and Ohio that Alan McClellan created, and of course Tony Custer's Allegheny Midland. I was also a fan of David Barrow's Cat Mountain Santa Fe. In recent years, I've really become a huge fan of the Allagash that Mike Confalone has created of his railroad up in Maine. And I also enjoy Tom Johnson's modeling, his Logansport and Indiana Northern for years, and now I guess now that he's moved to Florida, he's doing the Cass County Railroad. But that's really, the thing I love about Tom Johnson and Mike Confalone is the way the weathering is not overdone, but it makes everything super realistic looking. And that's what I wanted to be able to accomplish. And if I can get my lab to look half that good when I start scenery, I'll be thrilled.
Yeah, no kidding. I remember I think it was in Model Railroad Hobbyist, they did a series of, or at least a long article on rail fanning the Allagash.
Yes.
And that was, the scene was just amazing on that, and the weather.
Yeah, I've actually purchased several of his downloadable videos, and his ebook that it was a 4-part ebook that he did on creating, designing, operating, and the whole 9 yards. And it's just incredible what he's done. And he's got a Facebook page that I follow, but yeah, that one's a big one.
Cool, good deal.
I joined the Mount Hood Model Engineers. It was a local club. That was kind of really how I got my feet wet in the modeling when I moved back to Oregon from Olympia. Got back into it. I bounced back and forth between HO and N scale a few times and really struggled to figure out what I wanted to model. So I joined the club. I loved their freelance operation, their theme, the paint scheme, and was with them for several years. And technically, I guess I'm still an inactive member. I never officially resigned from the club. I just went inactive during financial hardship time in my life and never really reactivated myself. But I go down and visit the club every once in a blue moon.
Nice scheme.
Thank you. When I lived in Olympia, I built a small railroad out in the garage. It was based somewhat loosely on the Arcadia terminal that was featured in Model Railroader. Oh geez, back in '95, I think. But I called it the Black Lake Southern. I wanted to use my initials, and came up with the blue and silver paint scheme you see there. Then life fell apart. I ended up getting divorced and taking a trip to Colorado. There's the Mud Band Southern again. Jim even actually featured the Mud Band Southern, Black Lake Southern, on his railroad via an interchange. So he picked up that ex-New York Central Jeep 20 and repainted it.
Nice.
In Colorado, I went to visit a friend for a week, ended up staying 9 months. He offered me a job working basically on the railroad, unloading unit coal trains at this Comanche power plant in Pueblo. Basically, BNSF would hand off the train at the bottom of the spur. We'd run it through a rotary dumper, which was located kind of back behind this area here. We'd then bring the empty back down the spur and hand it off to the BNSF to go basically take it back to the Powder River to get more coal. Typically our trains were big power and 125 to 130 cars. If you've never run a big locomotive, let me tell you, 20,000 horsepower at fingertips is a pretty amazing feeling and experience. So
Fortunately, I can imagine.
same time I volunteered for the Pueblo Model Railroad, or the Pueblo Railroad Museum, and they were just finishing up this Jeep 9, or I think it might have been a 7 even, but it was repainted into bicentennial colors. The original bicentennial unit had been sold off by the Colorado and Wyoming, and they were unable to get it back. But they've got the other 3, the 102 through 104, and they painted this one back up as the Patriot. And I was excited to be able to be a part of the dedication ceremony when they unveiled it for the public on the 4th of July in 2007. That's me over on the far right. Neat little operation. They've got some very interesting equipment down there if you ever get a chance.
Cool.
Moved back to Oregon. My son lived there with his mom, and I was missing him growing up, so I reluctantly walked away from the railroad and came home, essentially. I started volunteering for an organization called the Willamette Shore Trolley. They are a historic trolley operation. They operate a museum about 45 minutes south of Portland, but the Willamette Shore part of the line is actually along the Willamette River, basically across the river from where Samtrack used to run. It's powered by a generator. They don't have overhead, but it's a former Southern Pacific branch. It's also about 6 miles. And I worked in the depot. I was a motorman, did track maintenance. This was our little maintenance away train because we're a bunch of foamers and thought we'd be funny and hook a whole bunch of little push cars behind it. The big one in front, there's a welder. We were getting ready to go out and no, that's the air compressor. I'm sorry. We were going out to do some tamping that particular day. About the same time, I became an author. I self-published my first and only book so far.
Oh, neat.
And it's one that's actually kind of through a print on demand service called Blurb, and it's actually still available. You can actually go to Blurb's website and search for trackside images of a railroad shutterbug, and it's still out there.
I'll have to get you to post that on our page once we're done with this tonight.
I can do that. Sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, that'd be great.
Getting back into model railroading. Once I got back, I wanted to get back into modeling. Lived in an apartment for a while, stayed with a friend for a while. Didn't really have a lot of room for modeling. And so I was modeling, freelance. I love freelancing. So I was coming up with different short lines for the Pacific Northwest. I was going to model the Clackamas Industrial Spur, which, crazy enough, a few years later was featured in Model Railroad Planning by another gentleman who designs track plans for a living. I'd always modeled the Pacific Northwest. I wanted to do something different. And so I'd started working at the hobby shop, Whistle Stop Trains, and met Joe. And we were talking one day, and I said, I want to do something different, but I don't know what I want to do. And I really like Joe's concept for the Arkansas Valley. I said, I'd like to be able to interchange with you, but I really can't do that from Oregon. So he helped me he asked me what I knew about the Rock Island. And I said, well, the Rock Island, at the time, this is what I knew. I said it was a railroad that went belly up in the Midwest in 1980. And that was literally all I knew about the railroad. And he showed me a couple of pictures from down the Arkansas and Louisiana area that the Rock Island served. I started doing some research and discovered how fascinating the Rock Island was. And so we came up with the Benton Southern, again, using my initials as the basis for the road name. Benton is a small town just a few miles, southeast of or south of Little Rock. And it started off basically, like Joe was saying, as a part of a former Mopac line between Benton and Sheridan, which is about, I want to say, 12 miles. And then the backstory goes, when the Rock Island went belly up, instead of all that trackage getting abandoned, which much of it did, south of Little Rock, the Benton Southern stepped in and took over operating basically everything south of Little Rock down to Winfield, Louisiana. They did not opt to keep the trackage rights into Alexandria. They just stopped at Winfield, and had a branch out to Hot Springs where I could interchange with the Arkansas Valley as well as in Little Rock. I moved into an apartment and had room for about a 2-foot by 12-foot shelf railroad in the master bedroom of all places. My wife, bless her heart, has been more than supportive, even though she's not a big train nut. So I came up with the system map. The Little Rock division consisted of all tracks south of Little Rock, which is mostly the former Rock Island, and then the short line out to Sheridan, which is right here in the middle. My first layout encompassed basically from the area right around the little town of Malvern, which is just a little ways southeast of Hot Springs. And I really didn't have a lot of room, basically just a main line with a passing siding that'll hold 5 or 6 cars and about 4 or 5 industries. There's kind of a hand-drawn map. It's a little bigger. You can kind of see what I had in mind.
Okay.
Malvern's down here, Hot Springs up here, and Little Rock up the top. This was the railroad. I was able to convince her to let me put a little bump out here in the corner to fit this nice fertilizer facility. not a whole lot of room, and the layout was basically a mess most of the time. It didn't get operated near what it should have, but it really served as a good testing. This was the first railroad I really had gotten much in the way of scenery done.
A good learning experience.
Yeah. Joe talked to me a lot about the Illinois Central, and when I really liked the look of the Paducah rebuild Jeep 10s, and when Anner Mountain came out with those, I bought just about every road number that they had. Why I needed 13 of them for a 12-foot long railroad, I don't know, but I just obsessed that way, I guess.
You gotta have backup power.
That's right. Couple of them, these two, I actually sent up to Rob Arsenal of Weather My Trains in Canada, and he did an absolutely amazing job weathering those. So yeah, this was basically my layout representing Melbourne. Here's an Arkansas Valley train. Joe had was getting rid of some of his older locomotives and really didn't know what to do with them. And he had said he was thinking about just throwing them in the garbage. I'm like, no. So I got them from him. I was like 4 or 5 locomotives, and so I just had something to kind of just to play with. Also acquired a couple of locomotives from Daniel Archer when he got out of the Archer Railroad and switched over to his West Falls and Northern. These not only look great with the weathering, but they sound incredible too. I called this little scene Old Man Compton's Place. My friend Dave, who's one of the owners of Whistle Stop, had taken one of his little garbage truck, mini metals garbage trucks, and repainted it and lettered it Sopke Sanitation Service. And so this was kind of me getting back at him a little bit. This Old Man Compton's a junk collector. He's got all these old trailers and old cars and crap laying everywhere. A couple more of the patch out Jeep 10s. I patched a lot of them with Benton Southern logos. I had decals made from a gentleman it was called Ed's Custom Decals, who's no longer in business, and they let me patch them out. And I love the fact that the lettering on the Intermountain locomotives is so easy to remove with the Solvaset and paper towel. Just comes right off. One more with a couple of Rock Island engines. I had a whole bunch of Rock Island power at one point. Anyway, then in 2018, my wife and I bought a house and moved out to a suburb called Sandy. I was excited because I actually would have a 13 by 17 foot room completely to dedicate to model railroading.
Nice.
And so I was talking with Joe, and I'd come up with a couple of track plans, and I told him, yeah, I'd like to model what would you think about me modeling a different division of the Arkansas Valley? And we talked about it back and forth and decided the Fort Smith to Kansas City line would be a good way to go, because I could still have mountain territory. I designed a couple of different track plans. This is what ended up being the Benton Southern's Lone Pine Division, which is the old Hector branch that Joe had decided the railroad was going to abandon back in the late 70s or early 80s. We stepped in and picked up that line as another growth opportunity. We were kind of like a early day Genesee and Wyoming, I guess, about 3 different properties. But this was it. This was what I decided to do along with the main line. After playing with track plans, I came up with a triple deck railroad that went around the room.
Oh man!
With a big helix that took up the middle of the room. There's kind of a quick sketch of this. Was the upper deck, which represented all trackage in Arkansas. Basically, it was Little Rock to Haskell, which is where there's a big junction for the Rock Island had the branch that went off to Hot Springs and Malvern, and the main line continued down towards Fordyce, El Dorado, and then down into Louisiana. And then I had a top branch, or sorry, the top branch was the upper deck was the Louisiana trackage. You came up the hill and came through a town called Ruston, which I had managed to score some great information on from a former Rock Island employee. And that was a big interchange point with the Illinois Central Gulf. Sadly, this railroad never really came to fruition. And then the bottom deck was a partial deck because I wanted to use underneath the railroad for storage and my workbench and so forth. So the bottom deck was the Hot Springs branch that came down to Malvern, and there was just a couple of switching plans. That's unfortunate, like I said, never really materialized. By the time I got construction going, I had kind of lost interest and gotten interested in modeling the AV. And this would have been the old Rock Island line south out of Little Rock. I did get one small test scene done and took it, man, it was maybe a 5-foot section where by 1 foot deep, where I had actually planted a bunch of super trees. I decided I wanted to model the dead season similar to what Mike Confalone is doing, where it's the end of winter, just the spring is just getting ready to start. Everything's brown and muddy and dirty, and there's no leaves on the trees. And just the brown season, I think, is what he calls it up in Maine. So I wanted to do something similar, and I know Arkansas had a lot of deciduous trees, so that made a good opportunity. And started playing with scenery. Some ideas I liked, some I didn't. Here's a pair of Arkansas Valley C420s. Another one of the Archer units. But these are all from that one little section.
Your scenery looks good. What you got to work with, it looks really good.
Then I realized, okay, having to stand on a step stool to get the top deck. The top deck was at 74 inches, and even I had to stand on a step stool to access and be able to see what I'm doing when switching. Wasn't really functional, wasn't happy with it. I basically let the railroad sit for a while and just did nothing with it, and ended up one day just got a bug in my rear end and tore out the bottom deck completely, lowered the middle deck and lowered the top deck to where they were a little farther apart and also much more manageable. The track is now eye level for me, and I'm 5'10", so I can see the top deck just fine with no problems. This is my current track plan. It's now a double deck railroad. The lower deck represents the Benton Southern, or the Hector branch, if you will. And down, basically the helix is inside here in the middle. So coming down from the Arkansas Valley connection, you come down into Lone Pine Junction. There's a grain elevator down here, small retail district, a depot, fire station, and then a small 4-track yard, an engine facility, and then one more rail served warehouse over here that deals in paper. Off the junction, there's also a line that veers down to Clarksville, which actually was a Mopac served town in real life, but the Hector branch and whatnot, we came up with the concept that the Clarksville to Lone Pine and Lone Pine to Hector was originally part of a logging railroad that ended up going belly up. The AV purchased it, built it on east to, I can't remember the name of the town that Joe told me it went to, but that had since been cut back. And they basically kept the small engine facility in Lone Pine for local service. anyway, the Clarksville line came around through Kings Canyon, where basically the tracks run through a big cut. There's a small farmhouse here, and then it comes out just at the north end of Clarksville. There's a small pulpwood yard and the Palmieri sand and gravel facility. I'll talk more about Palmieri sand and gravel here a little bit later. And then it comes into Clarksville proper. The main reason for the town was the Bell paper mill. They're a big pulp mill. So they have 4 spots at the main building for outbound pulp, 2 for roll pulp. Then they got a covered shed here that holds 2 cars that they put bale pulp in. Got 2 spurs for chemicals, caustic soda, sulfur, what is it? Anyway, there's 3 or 4 chemicals that come in there. And then I've got a spur track here that I can use for off spot or an occasional load of wood chips that comes in for the mill. The other industry is Ashcroft Beverage, named for my friend Joel Ashcroft, who's a Union Pacific engineer out of the Eugene, Oregon area. Big time modeler. He always is asking, does it have working standards anytime something new comes out? So, also at Lone Pine Junction, the track comes back out right along the wall, ducks into some hidden trackage, and starts climbing and comes out just a few inches higher at Hector, where the Mountain Timber Company is. That was a mill that was an actual mill in Hector that is operated by a friend of Joe's. So we decided to put that in there, and they handle a couple of carloads of lumber a week. So not a real active shipper, but just a couple carloads here and there just to add variety to the operations. The top deck is, I want a continuous run, and that was important to me, even though during op sessions, I won't really use the continuous run feature. So I put in a removable bridge because the door into the room opens in. I built a big staging yard for Orc, where there's 7 tracks. I can stage several Arkansas Valley trains, plus a Benton Southern turn that runs from Orc down to Lone Pine and back. That's how the main traffic gets from the AV to the Benton Southern. Coming off across the bridge, you come through a little town of Catalpa, which is a blink and you miss it town. There's a couple of non-rail served commercial buildings and houses here. Come around the corner and you've got the main siding at Catalpa, and then down at the bottom is Catalpa Junction, where the actual Benton Southern takes over and loops down towards the bottom deck. Also in the corner is the big Tyson feed plant. I wanted to be able to run all those Arkansas Valley home shops cars that I picked up, and so that's where that is. So AV runs the unit train from the 3 back staging tracks into Orc, and then a local AV local will run the cars out and service the 2 industries there at Barton Family Farms and Tyson Foods. Here is the lower deck. Is the Bell paper mill.
Okay.
Got the outbound pulp over here. It's served by its own switcher. So the Benton Southern brings the cars into basically to the mill, and then the mill actually spots their own cars. And that particular locomotive is another Joe Loggins, hand-me-down, I guess you could call it. It's it was done for the Mid-South Leasing, something he created, I guess, back in the 80s or 80s or early 90s. And a couple of, see the different tank car spots. Then around the corner is the Ashcroft Beverage. Still working on the final layout for this. I really haven't started scenery. I want to get scenery going on this as soon as possible, but I want to make sure the track and everything is the way I want it first. So I'm not going to get bored with it too quick. This is the mill hector. You can see there's just a couple inches of difference in height, but the scenery, I'll put some trees where this pink foam is to just kind of hide, keep the two scenes separate.
Yeah.
The wigwam burner is actually a 3D printed model done by Bruce Barney of the A&LW lines.
Oh, wow.
It's absolutely amazing, and he does incredible work.
I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to ask you, when you got the buildings back at the paper mill, were those looked like some of them were like kits? Was the paper, the big one in the back left, was that a scratch build?
It was a kit bash
Okay.
from a couple of Walther's kits that my friend Jay Becker built.
Okay.
He's built a couple of the structures on here. The rest of these are Pike stuff and that kind of thing.
Okay. Looks good.
This was DPM parts that was built by a late friend who passed away, who really got me back into modeling right out of high school. We had a loose knit club that operated up in his attic on his railroad, and when he passed, I was tasked with dismantling the railroad, and I saved a few of the buildings to use on my railroad someday in honor of him. So the main mill building there, I picked that up as part of a estate collection, out of a state collection that the hobby shop had picked up. Same with the little office building. Those were just, I bought them looking just like that. So here's Palmieri Sand and Gravel and the Delaney Pulpwood Yard. I don't know if I'm going to keep the little critter for the cement plant, but at this point, and you can see the Hector branch disappearing through the backdrop there. Still have a little ways to go to try and refine that and disguise that opening a little bit better. I'm trying to figure out what the best way to approach that is.
And what does that lead to?
That takes you basically behind the helix. There's a window right here.
Okay.
And it takes you back into Lone Pine Junction.
Now, is the scenery in that area going to be like trees and stuff like that?
I'm still trying to figure that out. There's going to be a lot of trees. Yeah. I think it really needs to have that. There's really not a lot of tunnels in Arkansas. So
what you could do is like right behind the Palmieri building on the left there, the white and with the silver roof, you could put like a line of trees coming up the left side of the building along the track, maybe, and then on both sides. And then when he gets back behind that structure right there, just put a whole bunch of trees there and let them kind of disappear into the trees. Something like Mike Conflin would probably do.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And that's probably what I'll end up doing. There'll be a little access road, just private road crossing coming into the facility. And coming around the corner, this is where the only place where I've even started scenery. This is Kings Canyon. Palmieri Cement's right around the corner behind here.
Okay.
So it's a little bit of a canyon here, and then it comes out where the fascia is actually quite a bit above the tracks. So there's gonna be a whole row of trees all the way across here, so that it doesn't, so that it kind of hides. When you're doing photography, you can just have pictures of the actual layout, not all the stuff behind it. So,
gotcha.
What do you call it? There was an article in Model Railroad Planning a couple of years ago, and I think they call them a Bellina backdrop. So,
I don't remember that one, but
it was just 1 or 2 years ago. I can't remember which one it was.
Okay.
After you come around out past King Canyon, there's one more industry. This is going to be a specialty chemicals plant. It's called Geo Specialty Chemicals. They receive tank cars of sulfuric acid and occasional covered hoppers. I had it in my mind what I was gonna do for what the product was. I'm drawing a blank at the moment. It's been a long day. I've kind of mocked up to hide the opening in the backdrop here for
Mhm.
the Hector branch, and the track goes into the helix.
So it's not part of the Midtown Oil that's on the bottom left, huh?
No, the Midtown Oil building's still sitting there. It was something else. I
Okay.
originally was going to put an LPG plant in there, and so the Midtown Oil building may or may not go away. I'm not really sure yet.
Okay.
As I get further into it. And then I've got a interlocking tower there. Probably the real prototype wouldn't have had an interlocking tower at such a remote junction, but who knows? It was a neat model and I couldn't help but pick it up, and so there it sits.
Placeholder.
Yes, coming around the corner as this is the actual Lone Pine Junction itself. The front track here goes to the junction where the interlocking tower is. The back track is the Hector branch that goes up to the lumber mill. I've got a feed elevator here. They ship, 1 or 2 cars a month. Again, really infrequent. 99% of the traffic on the Benton Southern portion of the railroad is going to be going to the paper mill in Clarksville. Then I've got a retail district, a handful of buildings I've picked up. Couple of I like the Woodland Scenics ready lit structures, so I've got a few of those for the railroad. This came out of a collection at the hobby shop. The depot is actually a UP depot that I modified a little bit. Didn't put all the ornate decor on it like the UP would have. And then the Willow Grove Fire Station. I named it Willow Grove for my brother-in-law, who's a firefighter in Willow Grove, New Jersey. So I wanted to kind of do that because both my brother-in-laws are firefighters, as was my father-in-law before he passed. Then you come around the corner. There was a little yard there, just a couple of tracks, nothing fancy. It didn't really have anything photo worthy, so I skipped down to the end. This is right next to the door. This is the Benton Southern Engine Facility and the Last Industry Compton Press. They receive printer paper.
Okay.
So, and that's
Nice.
then going up to the top deck real quick. I'll try and wrap this up pretty quick.
Take your time.
The main yard, staging yard, from one end and from the other, got the Conrail or the AV through pig train that they get from Conrail, and it goes down into Texas. I painted this engine as a one-off, or ended up painting it incorrectly according to Joe, because the white stripe's not supposed to go behind the cab. He gave me a lot of razzing for it, and I just told him, you know what, it was a shop error, it was a one-off job, and they just, rather than repaint it, they just left it.
Extra safety precautions.
Yes. Coming around the corner from the yard, basically over the front of the helix, or behind the helix, the top deck, you've got the junction, the track in the foreground. Going off to the right is the branch that goes down into the helix and down to Lone Pine. The AV main line's the back track here. The main line is in front, the passing siding in the back. There's basically a group of maintenance away buildings at Catalpa. And here's the big Tyson feed mill. This is another J. Becker structure.
Cool.
He built the main building from several Walters New River mine kits, and the grain bins are from Rick's products, and I think the elevator is as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna bet that's a recent photo.
About 2 hours ago.
Ask me how I can tell.
How can you tell?
Because of all the different numbered AV cars.
Well, yeah, there's that too.
And if you, I don't know, I know I sent Joe the picture today that the first AV car, it was 64014, something like that.
Uh-huh.
If you go to Home Shops, there's only 2 left.
Wrong. There one left. And another one is sold. So it's down to 1 car left. Who's going to get the last one?
That's going to be the first one to sell out.
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
the closest one that I can tell is one of the Copper State cars. There's 9 left.
Right, something like that. Yeah, I looked at that too. I got a Copper State one Saturday, but from my local hobby shop. So
Yeah, nice. Those are beautiful cars. I love the copper logo on it. That just
Yes.
they hit a home run with that.
They did.
The track in the foreground, the spur coming in the very foreground is goes to Barton Family Farms, which is another little feed elevator. I used the little thumbtacks as blue flag protection. Eventually I'll make some actual blue flags from Details West or one of those companies to put in there, but for now I'm just using the safety pins. Barton Family Farms, not much to it. There's a little mill retail building, and then they've got a couple of little elevators, another little structure I picked up at from a collection at the hobby shop.
Cool.
And here on the top deck, right above the paper mill, is the little town of Catalpa. The Moe's Skeeters is a little scenic building. The rest of them, I believe, are kit bashed kits or scratch built. I'm not sure which. I've all been purchased secondhand. The little house here has a couple of guys sitting on the front porch playing checkers, which is kind of cool. And then Libby's is the local watering hole. And then where the track kind of dead ends, that's where the bridge piece connects the track in to go across the door back over to the yard. Kind of an overview of the railroad. In addition to model railroading, my other addiction is collecting railroad slides. I have entirely too many of them. My wife on my case about it, which she probably is justified in doing.
Now, is that your own pictures, or do you get collections?
I've bought many collections. I've only personally shot maybe half a dozen roll of slides in my life.
Okay.
I always shot prints growing up and was a very rank amateur when it came to photography. Didn't really get good at photography until about 2004, 2005. Really started doing it in earnest. Ended up becoming a professional photographer and doing weddings and farmers market booths with my landscape and nature stuff. I did weddings and senior portraits for a few years, got tired of it because I love the shooting. I hate to post edit. So I just got tired of doing that.
And I imagine the hours aren't great either.
What's that?
I imagine the hours are not great either.
No, and yeah, for every hour I would spend shooting at a wedding, I was spending, 4 to 6 hours at the computer making them perfect.
Yeah.
Which, a lot of people don't understand why wedding photographers are so expensive. That's why.
Have you ever thought about having all this, or at least maybe start getting some of the stuff like digitized or anything like that?
The slide collection right now sits at about 180,000 slides.
Wow.
And I've digitized maybe 15,000 of them.
Jeez.
And it's just so tedious and time consuming. My little slide scanner will only handle 4 slides at a time.
Man.
So,
but that's going to be something for when you really retire and can't model anymore.
Exactly. If I end up falling and breaking a limb and can't work anymore, this will be what I do for fun. Yeah. You can see here how the Catalpa Junction's right here, and the grade coming down the helix fortunately isn't too bad. It's right about between 2.5% and 3%, which is steeper than I'd like it to be, but it functions. I've been toying with, and because I keep making changes, I'm toying with taking and disconnecting the railroad right here and turning this whole piece of peninsula 90 degrees thinning it down and connecting it in over here on the left somewhere. I've been toying with that for about a month now. I want to do it, but I don't want to kill all the progress that I've made. So I've kind of stopped working and just been playing for a while.
Okay, what's the thought process behind that? What would the objective for that be?
Longer run.
Okay. Gotcha.
Because from the window to the front edge of the fascia, from the front edge of the fascia is probably 6.5 feet, 7 feet. Whereas if I were to turn it 90 degrees, I'd have about a 10-foot run.
Okay.
So yeah, it enabled me probably to model another scene or two. So it's something I'm toying with. I'm not going to do anything anytime soon. I want to make sure I'm 100% certain it's what needs to happen before I do anything.
Yeah, for sure.
So I operate the railroad with a switch list form that I've created using Excel. Pretty straightforward, nothing too fancy about it. I hand fill out the hand fill out the switch list before the op session. I've been toying with going to waybills on the kind of as an add-on to the switch list. So the waybills would be handled by the clerk, which would be me between sessions, and I would use them to write out my switch list, which is what the crews would actually do once I start having op sessions. I had one op session about 1.5 years ago, when it was still a triple deck railroad, and that was a big reason why I swapped from 3 decks to 2 decks. But they like the switch list option because they're not carrying around a bunch of waybills and trying to sort paperwork on the layout, and so forth.
Yeah,
so I love I love to know where a car is going, where it's coming from, what route it's taking. That kind of thing has always interested me. So doing these waybills helps me kind of satisfy that itch, while still making things simple for my operators.
Right.
So
they look very well done.
Thank you. These were actually done with a template I got from Mike Rose. He hosts the crew call with Mike Rose.
Right. Yeah.
In addition, Joe and I created a Arkansas Valley through freight schedule for the Arkansas Valley side. That worked on this and surprised Joe with it here about maybe just under 1 year ago. And this was an idea I got from Alan McClelland in his V&O book that he published years ago. Train ID, where it's going from, where it's going to, any particular notes about it, and like these are coming from Fort Smith White Bluff Yard. There's 2 yards in Fort Smith, one called White Bluff, which is the main east-west yard, and Chaffee Yard, which is the yard that comes, it's on the actual dog patch division as you start to head out of Fort Smith towards the Ozarks. And then I have in there is also more detail, this train, this is how the train's blocked, what cars you're picking up, what cars you're setting out, and it takes you right through it. So, and then I can make simpler small cards that I will give, like with the paperwork for the job, for the switch jobs. Excuse me. Okay. All right, I guess that's that. Cat's out of the bag. We're talking about culinary sand and gravel. In your sheet, you asked if I'm going to do a special run Benton Southern freight car.
Right.
Short term, I don't have one. I want to do one with home shops. Chris and I are working on the details for that. That's still coming soon.
Okay.
This is an AccuRail car that I'm going to do myself a short run of, so that I have cement cars for the sand and gravel pit. I actually created the logo and basically what you see here, sent it to Chris and asked for his blessing. He was like blown away by it, as he, honored that I would even consider doing something with his name on it, and was thrilled to see it. And he said he'd even pick up a few for his railroad. So these will be hopefully coming soon as I come up with the deposit. Okay. As soon as I come up with the deposit for the to get the ball rolling. So that will be hopefully in the next few months.
All right, cool. So AccuRail, nice.
Okay. I've also thinking about having AccuRail do an actual run of these. These are hand decaled from data only cars. I've actually put together 5 of these cars. One's on Joe's Railroad. I've got 3 of them at home, and another friend Jay has one as well. But I want to actually do an actual run of these for sale, and then to add more to my fleet as well, because decaling's fun, but not that fun.
Right. If you can get them all done for you, yeah, that's definitely the way to go. And then
Yeah.
of course they give you the extra number sets that you can change the numbers real easy.
Yes, which is really nice. And that's one thing I really like about AccuRail.
Yeah, with the car color background, so it makes it so easy.
Yeah, this is a KD car that I detailed from an undecked car. Just another one that I'm playing with.
I like that one. Yeah.
There's my paint scheme for the locomotives. Basically, the locomotives are MKT red with black underframes. I'm going to name all of the locomotives after people who have influenced me or friends. Jim Lyons was a good friend who actually was from Ruston, Louisiana, excuse me, and was a big Rock Island, Illinois Central Gulf modeler. So
nice.
I also have done some F units, which I've got on my background picture. Those are going to be named, the F units are named for towns, Little Rock and Benton. I even took a decal and did a River Point Station high rail truck. Yeah, it's too new. It's a 90s. I believe it's a 90s or early 2000s truck, but I don't care. I like it.
I noticed that one in one of your photographs you went through earlier.
Yeah, I've done a few Arkansas Valley vehicles as well, doing the same kind of thing.
Cool.
Well, that's the end of that.
Okay.
Let me get out of sharing here.
Well, good. That's super interesting. That was a great presentation for that.
Thank you. I also want to give a huge shout out to Rapido, because they just produced the new Chevy Caprice station wagons from the 80s.
Yeah.
And let me
Oh, you got the one with the woody side?
I did.
Go ahead, hold up the camera and I'll pin you on it.
I'm trying to get rid of the background.
Oh,
There
okay.
we go. This one's the light blue.
Okay. There you go, right there.
And this car is the exact car, color, make, model, the whole thing that my mother had when I was a kid growing up. So we called it the mothership. And I sent a picture of it to my mom, and she's like, "Oh my God, that's the car." A lot of good memories from that car. A lot of road trips.
That's neat.
As a kid.
Nice.
So that's what I've got for you. I don't know if you have any questions or.
I do have one still from the outline about merchandise. You got any B&S merchandise available anywhere? And if so, where could we find it?
Oh, what? I guess I didn't have that. Hang on a second. I do.
See, I know where to find it, but I have to ask a question so everybody else knows.
Yes. I've got Home Shops has been super awesome, and even though I don't have a freight car with them yet, they have created t-shirts, hoodies, and coffee mugs. The shirts and hoodies are available in white and gray, and then there's 2 different sizes of the mugs, similar to what they're doing for the other roads. You can find it on Home Shop's website under the Arkansas Valley merch page. So yeah, that's where those are available.
And there it is.
There we go. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, you just go to the AV page for merch and scroll to the bottom, and you got, like you said, the t-shirt, the coffee mug, and the hoodie so far.
And just a tip, the hoodies run just a little small, so order up a size.
Yeah, I found the shirts do that the same way.
The shirts do too, yes.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
the quality is very good. I like them. I'm very happy with them.
Yeah, they're great. I've got several and
Yeah.
love them.
Okay, let's see. If I don't have any more questions for you, does anybody else have any questions for Brian? If you do, want to just go ahead and unmute everybody want to unmute themselves, and we can just have a free for all, and I'll ask Brian a question at the same time.
Looks like Dave Hammer asked, wonder if I can pick up one direct from AccuRail. Are you talking about the
Palmieri car.
Palmieri car or the Benton Southern car?
Oh, can't hear you, Dave.
I can't hear you,
Yeah,
Dave.
There
Palmieri
you
car,
are.
because for me, AccuRail is about a half-hour drive
They
physically.
I have not physically done the run yet, so they do not exist yet. I don't know how that would work. I think I don't know. I'd have to ask AccuRail.
I would think probably not, because they're
Yeah.
gonna, Brian's gonna be the one ordering them. They're gonna send them to him. So
Right, and then
somebody
it's
else
sending
him
it right
take
back
the
to
orders
me,
and
but I
send them
figure
out.
save him like 20-30 bucks in shipping and handling just
Yeah.
to go physically pick it up in person.
Well, we can let Dave pick them up, and he can drop ship them for
There you go.
you.
Well, I'll talk to AccuRail about it, Dave.
I mean, I don't think
And-
it's possible, but
And
you
of course,
never
he
know.
wants to know if you have a Ken Mason car yet.
No, not yet.
That's funny.
And yes, it's a very similar car to the one used in the vacation movies. Just
Right.
different color.
Yeah, it is. I know they did a good job with that. As long as it fits your era, and it's something you have memories of, it's definitely a perfect car to pick up from Rapido. I've got and of course, all the guys, the regulars over here know that I picked up one of there's the New Look Fishbowl buses
Mm-hmm.
for the New Orleans. And I can remember riding a bus like that a couple times in the suburbs, back and forth to school now and then. If I missed our school bus, I'd have to ride that bus.
TriMet in Portland had very similar buses. Rapido hasn't done that paint scheme yet, but maybe someday they will.
Mhm. Okay.
Brian, I was wondering,
No.
is most of your track and turnouts all from one manufacturer, or is it piecemeal?
It's Atlas Code 83.
And no trouble laying out the helix with it?
No, I just took it a little bit at a time, and I laid cork down on the particle board, and it went in pretty easily. Not too many kinks. I like the look of micro engineering track, but it's just a pain in the butt to work with. So I just decided no.
Is that
I
because
like the
trying to make the
reliability of the
curves?
Atlas track.
Is that trying to make the curves, Brian, because of that?
Yeah, it's trying to make the curves because it just doesn't want to flex easy, and I love the flexibility of. So.
Did you ever see Jerry Leone has a video on Model Railroader Video Plus about making the curves on those? And what he does, he takes a clothespin, I believe, he takes it off of the spring, and he'll set up like a template with the curve he wants,
Mhm.
and he'll take the clothespin and run it along one side of the track, and as you do that, it starts to curve.
Okay.
I'll have to try and find that video, and I'll send you the link to it.
See you later.
All right.
Thank you, Greg.
Yep, Greg had to run. Okay, his wife. I know when his wife comes home, he goes off and they spend the evening together, which is nice. So,
That's a good thing. Happy wife, happy life.
yeah, you got that right. So, all right. Any other questions for Brian? Michelle, you're quiet. You're muted.
I know I'm quiet tonight. I listened though. It's
You're
really
probably
interesting.
still tired from your trip. When did you get back?
I'm on Sunday.
Sunday,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, and I'm actually kind of setting up my new computer system. You guys are on my old laptop, and I got this brand new computer right here.
Ooh.
Okay.
So I've been letting it like run installs. So, but
Gotcha.
yeah, I'm really interested in your time in Pueblo because I lived in Pueblo for quite a while. So,
Yeah,
that
I
was really interesting.
lived in an apartment off of Rupel
I lived
over just right off of I-25.
When were you there? Like what years?
April 2007 to October 2007.
Oh, I was already gone. I was there way early on, like the 90s. So
Yeah, I was only there for about 9 months.
yeah, I didn't mind it. It was okay. But I like the Rail Museum. It's really
The Rail
nice.
Museum's cool. I love the fact that they've got that Department of Transportation U30C there.
They got some weird stuff
They've
there.
got some obscure stuff. Yeah.
They have some one-of-a-kind stuff that was tested by the government in the 1950s.
Yes, the maglev type thing.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really
monorail
cool
stuff
with the
and the
rocket on it. Yeah, the monorail.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. So there's something outside of Pueblo called the Transportation Technology Center.
Mhm.
And it used to be a top secret location, and then when they closed it, just for everybody else, when they switched it over to the Association of American Railroads and just made it a test center, a lot of that top secret historic stuff went to the Pueblo Rail Museum. So you can go see these crazy cars they were testing out there. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I drove out to the test center once. We got within about a half a mile of it, and we had heard that they're not
Over that
super
last
receptive
bridge.
to guests. So yeah, saw some stuff from a distance. Put on my 300 millimeter lens and shot what I could.
I was married to an engineer who worked there for, well, he's still working there, but I was married to him for 14 years. And I think I was allowed on site 3 times.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
3 whole times. Wow.
Times did I go out there. They had a family day. In the 90s, they used to let the family come out and they would bring in some Amtrak cars and take us on their big 60-mile loop and take us for rides. And they did that like 3 years in a row. And then that was it. And I never went back.
Wow.
Yeah.
That seems odd.
Yeah, so they have all these different buildings too that they do different things in. One of them is a ECP brake lab, and they have 100 cars worth of brake lines just back and forth in this room. So the room's as wide as a rail car in the lines. So they're a real distance. They're just back to back like this. It's pretty interesting. They have a room where they shake locomotives till they fall apart. They literally like until it's like a test to see when they break down, and it really loud. And just they have lots of, I don't know what they have today. They're probably even more interesting and better stuff. And now they have a ton of hazmat training. They light stuff on fire out there, blow stuff up all the time. So it's pretty
They did that
interesting.
video of them vacuum effect on a tank car out there for as part of a Mythbusters thing.
Oh, remember that.
Yeah.
Where it went from a nice round tank car to flat as a pancake in like half a second.
Oh,
It's crazy.
yeah, I remember that episode. Yeah.
Yeah,
They're
it's on YouTube if you want to look it up. It's crazy.
I've actually met them in person when they came to came out to our local college one year when they were doing a part of their tours.
That's cool.
Neat.
So the TTCI center is actually moving. They're putting in where the test track center was. They're actually putting in a huge rail facility for business on part of their property. And so they're moving the test center down onto what was I don't know what you call it. I just remember they used to store like hazardous chemicals there. It's like a military. Do you remember what it's called? It's south of the test track.
Like a military depository or something like that.
Yeah, where they just like they would ship in hazardous stuff and bury it.
Yeah.
And so that's where they're moving to that land, which I think is really strange. But
Yeah, I don't know that I'd want to be working when there's chemicals like that buried underneath. No thanks.
So I'm not sure
Really?
how that's going to go down. So that's happening right now. It's in process.
Interesting.
So anyway, so when I first heard of the Arkansas Valley Railroad, I expected it to be the Pueblo area because that's the Arkansas Valley. So, have to say I was a little confused about the Arkansas Valley lines when it first came out, when I first met them. So,
I'm sorry, Michelle. I didn't know it existed back then. I mean, all right.
well, you can
Well,
always just expand out into the Arkansas Valley.
Yeah, Joe, we'll just have to add another branch line that veers off at like Oklahoma City and goes up to Pueblo.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what you could do? You could build a separate, smaller layout somewhere of the Leadville Railroad because it goes to the headwaters of the Arkansas River. So
Oh,
then
there
you
you
could have that spring where the Arkansas comes out of the ground. And that railroad
Oh,
all
boy.
the way out.
You could have a
Yeah,
Rocky
I went up to
Mountain
Leadville
division.
once. That's quite a ways up there, and it's interesting.
It's super interesting. We take our speeders up there and they
Oh,
let
nice.
us get off at the headwaters. That's where we turn around. So we all walked out and checked it out. It's really pretty. Really, really pretty.
That's awesome.
So Brian, you mentioned the Rock Island. Like,
Yes.
what were you trying to mile off of if you did that? Or like
Uh,
what era?
Late 70s, that mid to late 70s. That way I could include a little bit of the blue and white, but mostly have the nice rainbow paint schemes that they really did keep until the end.
So was that before they changed to the bankruptcy blue?
Bankruptcy blue first appeared in 1975.
Okay.
So I was gonna do 73 to 77. That way I could have a couple of bankruptcy blue units and fresh paint and
That's
Does
not,
that have to-
that's the
blue.
light blue color, right? The light blue.
yeah, the light blue and the
Okay.
baby blue and white. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because at the museum, we've got a couple Rock Island coaches, caboose, and one locomotive that we've repainted into bankruptcy blue.
Yes, I've seen that. That's absolutely gorgeous.
Nice. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and kill the recording, and if y'all still want to hang out and just chat a little while, we can do that. And let's see. Here we go.